what's coming up in the future doesn't frighten me as much as maybe what it should. Maybe I should have a healthy fear.
How did you shift and say, you're an awesome photographer? How do you say, no, I need to have other photographers that are not as awesome as me yet?
Necessity is the mother of invention. I need to make more money and work less. It's just that simple. I need to When black and white film changed to color film, you could no longer process it at home. My grandparents were pioneers, my parents were pioneers, and now as I'm approaching yet another disruptor in our industry.
I know in all professions, there's always a tendency to say, well, AI can never do what I do. I want to hear, do you have an approach to AI that says, no, photographers who are using AI for this are going to be here 40 years from now?
They need to be known, liked, and trusted by their customers. When you walk in to meet your financial advisor, if he doesn't look like the picture on the website, you are immediately not going to trust him.
Welcome to the Art of Succession podcast with Barrett Young. Join us as we explore the strategies, stories, and insights that shape the journey of leadership transitions and business success. No matter where you find yourself along the journey, this is the podcast where you'll find the tools to make it happen.
My name is Barrett Young, and this is the Art of Succession podcast. My guest today is Lesle Lane, founder and lead photographer for Studio 13. Lesle follows in the footsteps of her grandfather, both parents, and her stepfather in the world of professional photography. And today we're going to hear her story of legacy, innovation, and entrepreneurship. Lesle, welcome to the Art of Succession.
Thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this conversation. So third generation photographer, which is very impressive to have that kind of legacy in the family. We'll get into that. But I'm kind of wondering, Lesle, what brings you to the Art of Succession today? What do you want my listeners, like the biggest takeaway for them from our conversation would be what?
Well, I think that small business owners, especially when you're in a solopreneur, a lot of people call it that, photography, videography, graphic design, they don't really know how to plan for their future in this field. And my stepdad did not do a great job at planning when I took over his business. And I just really think that there are ways that we can do it that are really relevant to the times, that we can just get the creatives to be more profitable and more business-minded so that we can think about business before creativity, or at least at the same time. And I just think it's something that in these creative fields, a lot of business owners don't see themselves as business owners. So I'm hoping that we can translate that, because I definitely see myself as a business owner first and a photographer second. And so I would love it if my fellow creatives would really step up and just listen to your podcast, think about their own business in different ways.
Yeah, I mean, I love that, just speaking to your profession. Mine is similar, CPA profession. It's like, well, I am my business. So I have these relationships, and when I'm gone, the relationships are gone. So I'm sure it's like photographers just see, no, I love taking pictures, and I don't know how to teach this. It's hard enough to bring in money to feed my family, much less build a team and everything. So I'm really looking forward to just your thoughts on this whole conversation. So you have got an amazing write-up on your website. People can find that in the show notes about your family history and everything. But I mean, give me the snapshot of 60 plus years, 70 years, I think, of photography in the family.
Sure. So it all started with my grandfather. It starts out actually quite sad. My grandfather was abused by his stepfather. And during the Depression, he ran away from home to get away from that abuse. And, back then there were no child protective services. There was no place for him to go. He was an 8th grader at the time. And so he had to find work. And nobody was really going to take an 8th grader very seriously at the time. And so he started traveling with nomadic people that would go from town to town selling their goods and services. And one of the people that was in that nomadic tribe was photographers. And so they would go into a town and they would take pictures, and then they'd leave and get the film processed. And then they would come back to that town 2 weeks later, and deliver the goods. And so that's how my grandfather learned how to be a photographer. And years passed. He was about 24 years old when he came back to a place in Florida, Perry, Florida, and he was charged with taking an engagement portrait of a beautiful woman, the daughter of a sawmill owner. And she was 19, and he went in and he took her photograph. And 2 weeks later, when he came back, he got that young lady and they ran away together and they eloped. And so that's how my grandparents got together. They were married 64 years. So it was obviously a well-matched marriage. And it became very evident that, traveling with a wife and soon to be children was not the way that they wanted to spend their marriage. And so they relocated there, several years into that, relocated to Columbus, Georgia, settled down and started Garrett's Home of Photography. And they grew that to a very, very profitable business. My mother came along, married my biological father at the time that black and white film was transitioning to color film. And so my father did not really love shooting weddings. And so my father and my mother started Garrett and Lane Color Laboratories, the first color processing outside of Rochester where Kodak was. And they grew that into a large multi-million-dollar business with the help of my grandparents who invested in that business. And both of those businesses ended up, one selling, the lab sold, and then my grandparents' business, they handed that over to my aunts. My parents ended up getting divorced. My mother and I moved to Indiana, which is where I am now, where she married Joe McGuire, who was a commercial photographer, McGuire Studio. And that's the business that I ended up taking over as a 21-year-old. Not a good thing. Just telling all of your listeners, 21-year-olds do not need to be taking over the family business. Do not recommend 0 stars. My stepfather.
I think we just lost a couple listeners. So.
My stepfather did not plan for this succession. He really didn't want me taking over his business because girls needed to be wedding photographers. And I was not a fan of wedding photography, still am not a fan of doing it. I can appreciate the art of it. And so I ended up being his office manager and took over his bookkeeping and his business practices for him before he was taken out of the business with a stroke. And so I took it over way too young. And that's how I ended up being where I'm at today, was taking over his business with my mother's assistance.
Wow. I mean, legacy is definitely throughout your whole story there. And we're going to talk about expectations and legacy and everything like that. Talk about, I mean, you mentioned it with just like a color lab, how different that was at the time, that it needed a whole separate company to be able to process this and everything. Just talk about just changes that your parents saw through those generations and what's happened in your profession over the past 80 years before you got into it.
Oh my goodness. I mean, and everybody, everybody's talking about AI as a future. Okay. And they're like, photographers are going to go out of business. Yeah, they may. Because guess what? When black and white film changed to color film, you could no longer process it at home. So there were so many photographers that were processing their own film. They either had a basement. That's what my grandparents were doing. When I was young, I even knew, because they still offered both black and white and color film. My parents did the same thing, black and white and color film. The black and white film was processed in the basement of my grandparents' house. The color film had to be sent away. It was too complicated. It was too much of a process. And so photographers went out of business. So then you just fast forward a little bit to my stepfather's business, where that was always corporate and commercial work, which is what I do now. He was processing E6 film, which is basically Kodachrome. If you knew what that was in the time, it's a positive instead of a negative. And then the clients would take that color film, that positive, and they would scan it to digitize it. Oh. And then you had to take that digital image and put it on a printing press to have that printed into a catalog or a brochure or an annual report or something like that. And so by the time I took over, I knew that there would be a time that film would not exist for my industry because it had to be digitized, and digital cameras were already a thing, even if they were the size of a trailer, but they were already in the process of being moved into daily use. And so I always knew that the day that film would not exist for corporate photographers because we were already digitizing film as it was. And so as we move now into AI, AI has been part of Photoshop for decades. It's just getting better. It's just getting more user friendly. So these, my grandparents were pioneers. My parents were pioneers. And now, as I'm approaching yet another disruptor in our industry, I'm looking into it and I'm saying, how can I use this to benefit my business, to transform my business, to keep me moving forward, just like the rest of my family has done all these years?
Yeah, that's interesting. Because I mean, it's very tempting when you see something that disruptive come along and just say, no, I'm out. And in a way, I mean, your grandfather said, I'm not the one to start a color lab. It was your mom and your dad that did it. But do you think your grandfather was obviously a self-starter, running away from home and, making it on his own and everything? Do you think that it was that legacy even back to him of he was an entrepreneur first and then a photographer, or a business owner first and then a photographer? Do you think it's that perspective that you're talking about that causes you to look at this like opportunity, not as doom and gloom?
Actually, is interesting. My grandfather was a self-starter. But when it came to the business, it was his weakness. It was my grandmother's strength. So even back in the 50s and late 40s, my grandmother was running that business at a time where women stayed home and did not work outside the home. My grandmother, she was the money. She was the finance. She was the person that managed the employees because it wasn't his strength. And so they found a way to work together to shore each other up, where she wasn't an artist, she wasn't a creative. And then my parents came together, and my stepfather was a business person, but he wasn't really always a great people person. He had a very big personality, and he was an artist, and his work, his way, the way he liked it. And he would argue with the customers and he would tick people off. And then he married my mother, who is a people person. And she was the business development, and she was the salesperson, and she was the account executive to smooth over my stepfather's rough edges. And so in business, you've got to have it all. And I'm very, very fortunate that because I was raised with my stepfather's little bristly personality and my mom's sales, that I got both sides of that coin, that I could be both creative and business. I feel like I'm kind of a oddity in the field, that I really do enjoy and thrive on both. So I don't know. I think I'm a culmination of two generations before me and the things that I have heard about and witnessed in my lifetime with two different types of businesses. Well, three, counting the lab. So it's just, I think it is a culmination. I do think that what's coming up in the future doesn't frighten me as much as maybe what it should. Maybe I should have a healthy fear.
So let's talk about just growing up in this world and the family expectations. And like you said, you were not going to be the one to take over your stepdad's company because that wasn't women shot weddings, as you said. So just talk to me a little bit about that. Did you grow up knowing what you wanted to do? Did you grow up knowing you absolutely didn't want to do this? Talk to me just a little bit about your development coming to this profession.
Well, we worked, both my grandparents and my parents ran the business out of our home. And so what they did was, our basement was a lab. We had black and white processing, color processing, E6 processing. We also had color print and black and white print. So we had 5 labs in our basement. And then the first floor was always the door that the clients came into. It was where the receptionist sat. We had a team of 10 when I was a child. That is also where our portrait studio was. And then we had a reception area, and then we had a break room on the first floor. And then our second level was our home. And so that was where I was allowed to wear pajamas. That was where I was allowed to walk around barefooted, because there was a dress code. The moment I stepped out onto the staircase to come downstairs, I was expected, no matter how old I was, to be dressed professionally, because I would be seeing clients. I would be talking to clients, and it was a daily part of my interaction. I was friends with the employees. I knew who everyone was. And there was just no negotiating with my parents on that. I was to be professional. It didn't matter that I was 10 years old. I was still expected to speak as if I worked at that business. And I think it set me up for success in life because of that. So did I want to do it? There certainly was an expectation, but I feel like that because I got my first camera when I was 6 and I loved it, I think that I did know that I was going to be a part of this industry. I have a vision for it. I've had it since I was a very young person, but mainly I got bored going out with my parents all the time and not having a camera. And so, I mean, they are both my stepfather and my mother. They used to joke all the time that they were amateurs, because amateur comes from the Latin derivative of to love. And both of them had a love of photography that even when they weren't working in the field, they wanted to go and shoot more. So that also makes me a little bit different. I don't pick a camera up much when I'm not working, as I'm sure accountants don't really do taxes while they're on vacation. Um,
You haven't met the accountants I know.
Okay. Well, that's good to know.
I love my spreadsheets, whether it's a Monday through Friday or not. So,
that's awesome. That's awesome. So, I think I did know that I was going to be in it, but I'll tell you, I was not going to be a wedding photographer. I was going to quit if that became my only choice. I just don't have the temperament for it. And I think that everyone that's in some form of creative business, they need to know themselves. And I just don't have the temperament to deal with touchy-feely photography. I like corporate work. I like to be in industry. I like to be in manufacturing, and I like to, photograph buildings and construction sites. And I'm just a little grittier than that.
I mean, obviously you've made those kind of choices. I think I read on your webpage, your stepfather was looking forward to adding wedding photography to the stable of what you guys would offer and everything. So is that normal? And because I know hobbyist photographers true amateurs looking to start making it a career are afraid to turn down any work. Is that kind of specialization, that niching, is that normal in the early stages of professional photography, or is that even unique to your family and your legacy and what you'd seen?
No, it is not unique. It is pretty common that you will pick one or the other, because I feel like that it's pretty natural, because it's a natural separation. Weddings, portraits, family portraits, senior portraits, nights and weekends.
Corporate, it's a schedule thing. Yeah.
Corporate photography, Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, maybe some weekends if you're doing sunrises and sunsets, or if you're trying to work at a facility that you want it empty when you shoot it. So it comes down to not just temperament, but scheduling. And that's a lot of why amateurists come into portrait wedding work first, because they can do it while holding down a real job. So they can ease themselves into it on nights and weekends, where corporate photography is a little bit harder to keep a regular job while doing corporate photography.
Feel free to defer if you don't want to, but I think on their webpage you had 2 brothers that were like the ideal person to step into stepdad's business.
They were the ideal candidates. My oldest brother, he came up to Indiana after he got married, and he was the first in line. He actually lived at the studio while it was under construction, because he could live there for free. And so he and his new bride came from Georgia. And they came to Indiana, having never really been in the snow or any kind of cold weather. And they were living in a 100-year-old house while it was under construction. So I would say that nobody really set them up for success in those circumstances. And because of my stepfather's bristly personality, they just didn't make it. They didn't enjoy the business. They didn't like Indiana. And so they were very short-lived. And then several years later, my middle brother came up, and he made it a long time. I think he made it 3 or 5 years that he stayed up here in Indiana. Loved it, had a great time, loved working for my dad, but he didn't want to stay in Indiana, and he didn't want to run that business. So really, I was, their last choice.
At that time, were you already working in the business, doing the admin side and all the accounts?
No, I
and
didn't
everything?
start the admin until I graduated from college. So that was when I was 21.
Okay,
took
so
over
you were
the
still
admin.
a kid when the two older brothers.
Yeah, they're
had
old.
their
They're significantly
attempts.
older than I am.
Gotcha.
But so 21 was when I started working at the business, and then 23 was when my stepfather got taken out. So I had 2 good years of doing the administration work. I also assisted my stepfather from time to time. The other assistants were busy, or if he felt like that it was an easy enough job that a girl could do it. I'm being real here. I loved my stepfather, loved him, but he definitely had a problem with strong women, which is funny because my mom makes me look tame.
And just for, time frame context, this is around the mid 90s or
Early
so?
90s, yeah.
Early 90s, and this
yeah.
mindset is still there that women shoot weddings.
Well, and even now, there are not a lot of female commercial photographers. When you have children and you want to have children, it makes it challenging. And if your spouse is not making enough money for you to stay home, well, photography is not a $1 million endeavor anymore. It was for my parents and my grandparents. They both, were millionaires, and my stepfather died a millionaire. I will probably not ever achieve that unless I can learn to save more faster. But it's really difficult for women to be commercial photographers and have children and be able to support the family financially.
Because they're raising the kids and everything during the week, and it's those nights and weekends that the husband's home and they can fit that in, kind of thing.
Well,
or
yeah,
because it's more seen as like a side gig or a hobby or something to supplement
it's
the family.
childcare. The
It's
cost of
childcare.
childcare and how much you can make as a photographer. I mean, you're not going to pull in a ton of money, and the husband's going to look at you and say, "So we made $500 this month because we took all your money and gave it to childcare." That balance of, it's kind of like, I know a lot of teachers that after they have children, they stay home because the cost of childcare is more than they can make as an educator. So those things have to be considered as a family.
Gotcha. Okay. So you're working with your stepfather for 2 years.
Yeah.
You're running the business. If he's more like, well, no, you said he was very business minded too.
Yes,
So
he was very, yeah.
How did you learn from him? I mean, he wouldn't let you be a photographer, but he's got to be teaching you this is the right way to run the business, or
yes,
did you even have
that's
to pull that out of him?
As the administrator, I was in charge of quoting. So writing the quotes, not coming up with the quotes. My mom did the quotes. She handed her notebook to me because there was no fax machine. There was no email. And so I had to type up the quotes on a typewriter, on an actual typewriter. Then, she would present the quotes to the client. There did come a time that fax was involved. So we did fax quotes. I also did the invoicing. I did the accounting and bookkeeping. We had to use a ledger and we had to do it all. There was an accounting breakdown where you had to break it all down and make it all balance. And I had to write all the checks and pay all the bills. Now, I was highly supervised because my stepfather, of course, would not give me free rein. But yes, I was doing all that administrative work for my parents for those 2 years. And then I was also assisting from time to time. And we had a huge studio on property. So I had been on set watching my parents take pictures since I was 6 when I moved up here.
You said when you were 10 or so going downstairs. There were about 10 people on staff. What was the size of the company at this point?
They were grossing about $600,000 a year, with 3 different photographers, 2 different lab technicians, an office manager or administrator. Before I came along, I know my stepfather had a set builder because they were building a good number of sets. So yeah, I mean, there was a team of people, and the photographers would switch back and forth between being assistants and being photographers. It just depended on who was booking that day. The thing I loved about my stepdad's business model was the revenue stream had so many tributaries. I mean, there were so many ways to make money back then between different scaled photographers who was doing what kind of work, between you made a profit on the film, you made a profit on the processing, you made a profit on the prints. You know, there were we would do copy negatives where people would bring photographs in that you would then copy so that they could get duplicates of it because they lost the negative. There was just so many ways to make money that just don't exist anymore. So I've had to find new revenue streams that, you know, make me more profitable and make the gross dollars I make larger than what they would be by myself.
Part of the draw, I would imagine, of business photography is, other than the scheduling and everything, is repeat customers. Is that right? I mean, ideally, if you're a wedding photographer, you're only going to shoot that bride and groom one time. You might do the wedding party and everything like that, but it's very much like a gig or a one-off kind of approach. You've got a lot of repeat business in commercial photography then?
And in wedding photography, like I know photographers who they only do weddings.
Mm-hmm.
But then I have another wedding photographer that she does babies.
Right.
And so she'll get the wedding and then she'll get the family afterwards. And so she grows with the family, and she doesn't stop shooting until they become seniors in high school because she hates doing senior portraits. So she'll start from the engagement through junior year in high school. So she'll get that repeat work. But for me, repeat work is critical. And also your repeat clients are also the ones that are the most likely to refer you. And so those referrals are a big, big part of our business growth.
I mean, I have to ask it because your stepfather was intent on the business not going to you, but then he had a stroke when you're about 23, and he's got other photographers. So was there any consideration of bringing one of the employees, elevating them to ownership? I mean, how did you get into that position? You admit 23 is not who should be running a business either. So
it was very, very bumpy. So part of it was logistics. So my mother and stepfather had actually gone down to Florida because he needed open heart surgery. And after not following his doctor's instructions here in Indianapolis, they refused to do the surgery here. They said he was going to die or stroke out on the table and that they would not be responsible for that. And so being that my stepfather is very driven, he had every intention of basically dying on the floor of the studio. He wanted to die with a camera in his hand. It was his passion and his love. He never had any intention of ever quitting. So they went down to Mayo Clinic in Jacksonville, Florida, and they did the surgery, and he indeed did stroke out. And so my mom was actually in Florida with him when it all happened. And so here I was, the office manager, answering the phones. And one day, my dad's assistant and the lab technician came up, the phone rang, and I said, "Studio, this is Leslie." And they said, "I need Joe to shoot a job." And I said, "Oh." And my friend goes, "Hey, put it on hold, put it on hold." And I'm like, "What?" And she goes, "You can do it." I go, "What?" She goes, I'll teach you. Let's go do it. Ask him if there's going to be an art director on the job." I'm like, "Excuse me, sir, is there going to be an art director on the job?" He said, "No, I need Joe to do it. I need Joe to go take care of it. I can't come down and art direct that." I said, "Okay, just give me the instructions. I'll send Joe out next week." And so we got the job. I went out, we shot the job. My assistant, who became my assistant forever, she taught me how to do it. We did it. We delivered the job. They had no idea that my dad didn't shoot it. And that's how I started.
Nobody was on site to double check. So
No.
they just got the result. And they're like, "Joe, great job as always."
And they paid the bill. So
Oh, man. Your parents are still down in Florida at this point then. I mean, how did he recover down there? Did he end up retiring down there? I mean,
No, he ended up unfortunately, he lost all movement of one side of his body. And so he was wheelchair bound for the rest of his life. He lived about 4 years after that. My mom, she wasn't sold that I could do it. I mean, I was too young. She wasn't sold, but she had to go back and forth, back and forth. You know, she had to be going between Florida and Indiana. And each time she tried to find somebody else to take it over and it just didn't work. They did. I mean, I had the passion for it. I had the drive for it. It took me years. And in fact, to be very candid, this business was not truly what I would call successful until about 8 years ago, because the transition was too rough. The disruptors were too many. So I had the passion, I had the drive, and then digital photography came. And I had to buy a $200,000 camera. And that's the only way back in 1997 that you could get into digital photography. It was a humongous camera and a humongous investment. But I had my biggest clients say, you either buy that camera or I'm going to, and I'm going to put you out of business. So I bought the camera to keep the client, and that kept things going status quo. But the investment was too much for the revenue. And so I never really got profitable. And then 9/11 hit. You know, I don't remember if that was before or after. What was the year 9/11 hit?
2001.
2001. So it was after that.
Yeah.
We had a deep V recession. Thank goodness it came back super fast. I mean, it really didn't last but about 12 to 18 months, because photography and advertising were the first to slow down and the first to speed up. And so luckily it didn't last too terribly long. And then you go into the transition of these big $200,000 cameras are now the size of your palm. Oh, look, it's a phone. And all of a sudden I've got to upgrade my equipment from this ginormous monstrosity to a smaller, faster piece of equipment.
That
but
you've
it was
just
still
finished paying off.
right.
To the next. Yeah.
But it was still 40 grand to get the smaller bottle. And then people think, oh, I could shoot it myself. And actually, that did not last a terribly long time, except then you've got the Great Recession of 09, 08, and 09. And I decided that would be a great time to sell my parents' studio, the building, because it was costing too much. And I decided I'd build a studio that was going to be half that much. And it still wasn't enough. My revenue went down from a $300,000 a year business to a $75,000 a year business due to that deep recession. And so it was too much, too fast, too many disruptors. And it was actually the disruptor of COVID that brought this business back. And I got divorced in the recession time too. But because of all the changes in the industry, people had no longer thought that they could shoot it themselves. They really did know that they needed people to shoot it. PPP funding and debt relief from the loans that they gave us, I was able to reconsolidate everything in the business, streamline it, bring it into my home, take care of it so that I was making enough to be profitable between everything that they did. And then I ran into another incredible disruption that caused me to change it even more. But I'm going to give myself a chance to breathe and let you ask questions.
Yeah. I mean, those are massive external shifts in the industry over the past 30 years. Talk to me just about being a 23-year-old with 2 to 3 professional photographers. Stepdad's had a stroke. You can't fool everybody. Eventually, those relationships are going to be clued in and everything. Talk to me about the internal just changes and disruptions that occurred too. back then
Well,
in the
who in
early
the
days.
world is going to take instruction from a 23-year-old?
I mean, if dad's got that attitude, then probably the people he's working with do too, right?
So we had two other photographers. One was about 60, 63. And the other one was, if I was in my 20s, he must have been in his 40s, early 40s. And it did not take long at all before I found out that the gentleman that was in the early 40s was stealing my business. So instead of shooting it and letting us bill it, he had rented a studio that he would then go in on the weekends and shoot for my clients. And luckily, one of the clients was, a good enough friend of my parents that they let me know. And so I had to let him go, and I had to do it, as a 20-something. And then the gentleman that was older, he was shooting for our biggest client. That's really all he did was, I would call it bread and butter work, product photography on a seamless background. And that client, I'm sorry, I'm just laughing thinking about it. The vice president of advertising called me into his office, and I fell down the stairs getting to his office. I was all dressed up in my business suit, fell down the stairs. My shins were literally bleeding. I limp into his office, and he says, "Sit down, young lady." Now, understand, I went to prom with his son because he's been a client of my parents for years. So I know this man closely. I know that he is extremely forthright. And he says, "Young lady, we have a problem." And I said, "Okay." He said, "I don't like how you're running this business. I need you to do better." And I said, "Okay, what do I need to do?" And he laid it out for me. And he told me, "This is how you need to treat your clients. This is how you need to treat me. This is what I expect of you. And I want you to get up to speed so that you can shoot for us." And I'm like, "Okay." And so I immediately went back, made the changes that he asked me to make for his account. Will remain grateful to that man for the rest of my life. He had a creative director that he's then sent down. She didn't think I could do it. My assistant that worked for me for 30 years, she said to the creative director, she can do it. She will do it. And the creative director and my assistant, they pulled me along. And I have had so many amazing people in my life that have believed in me. My mom did believe in me, but she knew I was too young. But she ended up, when she would come home, she would make me shoot and critique. Standing next to a light box with your mother, I don't recommend that either. She, as a bona fide master of photography in her own right, she has a critical eye that still is unmatched to this day. I just sent her images on Monday for her to review. And so I would love to tell you that I came along because I'm just that good, but I didn't. I came along because people had faith in me and they demanded it of me. But because I kept our largest account happy, and I did until that company actually closed. And that happened at the same time of the deep Great Recession. That's the reason my business tanked so badly, is I lost that big account. But that big account, they inspired me and took my passion and helped me funnel it so that I could keep the business afloat.
That's an amazing story to have a client who probably should be firing you, but instead says, "No, there's potential here," and mentors you as a client. That's just amazing.
And that creative director, she ended up being the director of advertising, and she is still one of my very best friends. I see her and talk to her on a regular basis, even though we don't work together anymore.
I hope that you've been enjoying part 1 of my discussion with Lesle Lane. We're going to pick up part 2 of our discussion. We're going to continue her journey through today. And we're going to talk about the key pivot that caused her to see her business as something apart from her as a photographer. You can find that episode linked right here. We have new episodes with business owners twice a month on The Art of Succession with their own succession stories. If you're interested in being a guest on the show, you can find that link down in the description below. If this episode has been beneficial to you, helped you in your business at all, I'd ask that you please share it with somebody else. That really helps out the podcast. And I want to thank you for watching The Art of Succession.